Okay, so today I will talk about blended learning in this session, kind of bring it all together in terms of what blended learning is all about, what does the blended learning strategy look like, and as you start putting together your thoughts whether blended learning is for you or not, and whether it works for you or not. And then we are going to dive deep into some of the components later today and tomorrow as we start discussing about MOOCs, OERs, and some other components, and how to kind of mainstream it into a blended learning strategy. So a little bit about myself. I have been in the training industry for about 17 years. I started off over here in India for a company called NIIT, which most of your people would know. Used to do training projects for Microsoft and PeopleSoft, and then moved on to VMware in the US, and was basically responsible for launching their first blended learning program. Stayed there for a few years, put their strategy together, and then moved on to the world of cloud computing with Amazon Web Services, where I put together their training and certification strategy. And then at Oracle, in my current role, I'm responsible for customer enablement, basically leading their training and certification strategy, bringing in the whole concept of continuous learning for our customers, partners, as well as internal employees, and also leading their customer reference program. So, so I come from a completely different world. I come from the corporate world, and I will bring, my experiences and my stories around blended learning and some of the trends that I've seen in the industry, and also eventually because I have also noticed that there is this gap that exists between the corporate world and the education world, and we have always noticed it. I mean, I as Dr. Ahuja also mentioned, and myself too, like I did not study what I'm doing today. I was not prepared to enter into this job role that I am. And the way we study in the traditional education system today is very, very different from how corporate learning and training happens. And what I want to bring into this talk is some of those experiences so that you, as teachers, as you start training your students for the life beyond school and beyond colleges, what can you bring in to kind of ease that transition for your students, if you will, from a traditional education environment into a corporate training environment. When I was putting this together, and I asked them, what do they what do they think about blended learning, and what are some of the key terms that pop up, and some very interesting things that popped up over here was, teacher popped up a few times, models popped up, instruction popped up, programs popped up, and then there were resources and development, e-learning, education. So kind of, if you look at it, basically it touches upon a very broad spectrum, if you will, these words. And that's true because if you really look at blended learning, it's not just about, you know, it's not just about one or two assets that we put together. Blended learning is a combination of a lot of things that are going on around. And how do we mainstream it into a formal learning way or an informal learning strategy, if you will? So, getting to the basics, blended learning is essentially, as you mentioned, is a combination of asynchronous and synchronous training. And asynchronous is different from just online or e learning training. Asynchronous training is any training that's not happening live, that's not synchronized, where the teacher and the student are not synchronized in the sense of time and space. Okay, so that was the constraints, and now let's talk about different in a blended learning system. What are the roles that different individuals play, or including technology? The teacher can either stay a teacher depending on the model that you pick up. The role can change into a facilitator, it can change into a moderator, a guide on the side, or an advisor. For an institution, like when we talk about colleges, or basically, a group of colleges, strategy, support, service, infrastructure, that all needs to be put together if we are going to mainstream it as a learning system. The learner, the students become take various roles. They either become researchers, right? So they're going to pick up knowledge from different areas. They're going to, in a self-driven model, specifically, where they are going to drive and the charter of their learning, they have to be researchers to be able to identify what works for them and find it on the net. Practitioners, collaborators, especially in social learning where you kind of enable peer-to-peer learning, then we become collaborators. The content has to be collaborative, interactive, individualized in some cases, problem-based learning, and deeper learning, understanding of the basic concepts, because everything else is going to change, right? The foundational knowledge Dr. Huja mentioned is extremely, extremely important. And then in terms of technology, asynchronous, synchronous, offline, online. And I want to kind of dive deep into the offline aspect of things, because that's very important. You know, people put together a great learning strategy and everything else, but then they forget the basic thing that there would be situations when internet would not be available, and then what do you do about it? Are you making your learning elements downloadable? Are you making your learning elements available offline so that people can access it? Kindle is a great example. When actually Kindle came out, and you know, there was this ability to download books. There was an old woman who had a Kindle, and she was I think she was in Lake Tahoe or Yosemite somewhere, and she tried to download a book, and there was no internet connectivity, and she sent an email to Jeff Bezos saying, well, I have this great tool that my kids have given. I can read the books, but what if I can't download them? And, you know, I don't have internet connectivity. And then the Kindle, they built in a technology so that even in an offline mode, you can download some stuff. It was not live streaming, and then you can read it. So that's about that. One key element that we should not forget is learning support, academic support as well as technical support. Like, you put all this system together, but if there's no support that's available, learners are not going to adopt the new technology. Learners are not going to adopt to a new way of learning. Okay, so I quickly want to touch upon the strategy considerations, and then what we are going to do is we are going to actually answer these questions for each of our courses that we do, and how we want to bring this information into or this model into our learning environment. So if you look at LinkedIn's research this year in terms of how job roles are going to change in next 2-3 years, you know, data analysis plays a big role. Artificial intelligence plays a big role. What doesn't go away year after year is the concept of mindfulness and being mindful leaders, because that is where the human interaction comes into play, and that's where the empathy that we bring in into our conversations, the understanding of individuals that we bring in, when the technology is not there, and it's never going to be there to take over, even with the artificial intelligence. So build upon that, change the mode in which you ask questions, and you'll see a better response. So once you make it non-personal, the feedback actually comes better. Make sense? Okay, then bring in motivation into the training, and we are going to talk about some strategies that learning as a service provides, like badges that they can display on their Twitter profiles, social media profiles, LinkedIn, and especially as you're grooming your students to actually enter the job market, some of those assets can be really, really helpful building in their initial resumes, because there's nothing much to show in the initial resume apart from the knowledge that you have gained. Some of the badges that they can put in and certifications that they can get from the industries when they're self-driven, we can talk about that offline, and I will be able to provide some input on that. Learning as a service is coming up in a big, big way. We have heard about software as a service, and this is another dimension to it when we actually extend the LMS capabilities. And what it does is it basically allows learners to take control of learning. Most of the LAS platforms that I see nowadays are actually bringing in artificial intelligence and machine learning into the play as well. So for example, if I as a student am taking a traditional programming course, and that's my path that has been decided, and 2 days ago I suddenly got interested in big data and started reading some blogs and articles around big data that were available as open resources. And So my learning path would change then. And it's an automated learning path. So it'll start showing, hey, recently you read these 5-6 elements of these things. Do you want to go on the big data track? And start kind of forcing the students to kind of take an alternate route. It's a guided way to do things, but it's something that is brought in and is very getting very popular nowadays, because it provides people an alternative way to think about things and provide them avenues that they did not know that existed. Moves the focus from event-based learning to continuous learning, becoming extremely important in today's day and age with innovation happening. Everybody is a learner, and your learning is lifelong. It changes with every job that you take, every hour your job function changes, and how do you build in continuous learning? So many organizations, one of the example being institutes, one of the example being Wharton School of MBA, what they have done is they actually provide free subscription to lynda.com for lifelong for all the students that are there. And what it basically does is provides them an avenue, a social collaboration platform, but also provides them continuous learning platform. And what can the students relate to? Bring in real life examples, for example. And technology challenges would be there. Like, I don't know, there might be a policy around not using YouTube, and it would be firewalled. And then what do you do? How do you bring it in? There's also the ability, that's why there is an ability to plan your sessions beforehand and provide students list of stuff. I've seen some teachers do that too. Watch these videos at home, come back, and we'll discuss these. And that's a good way of, yeah, that's one type of flipping. And well, I won't go there because that's not my domain as a teacher. But there are other ways of motivation also. I really think that the amount that the teachers spend in working with stuff, the the extrinsic motivations are also less. Like, one is the monetary aspect of it, but also badges, you know, those are big nowadays. I know the traditional environment doesn't think like that, but the ability to put those badges on your profiles, to be able to talk, opportunities for visibility, opportunities to present this, can help in a big way as well. So definitely we have to find motivations around it. I basically believe that most of the teachers that I've seen are kind of motivated themselves to educate the kids, self-motivated. I taught a class for one day, and after that I decided it was not my cup of tea, because it's a very hard job. It's a very hard job, and it does require a very different kind of skill set to be able to relate to each individual in the classroom. So I truly believe that there's a lot of motivation that comes in if someone decides to stay in that job.